Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Own Your Image Beyond the Mirror. I'm Deshante.
And Kane.
And today we have with us a very special guest, Raven Nole. How are you today, Raven?
I'm doing well. Thank you, ladies, for having me.
Thank you for coming on. So, we will let you introduce yourself to the audience, let them know who you are, what you do.
Sure. All right. So I am Raven Nole. I'm a counselor, life coach, and speaker known as the Soul Physician. And typically, I work with career women to help them deal with the emotional past that's impacting their future success. And I do this with my two signature services, the Soul Clinic and the Group Soul Clinic, also speaking events. And this is where I help women overcome childhood programming, unresolved trauma, self limiting beliefs so that they can flourish in life and use their skill set with confidence.
Oh, wow. Sounds like need all of that. All of
Yeah.
so take us back and just tell us how you got your start a little bit and what it is you do and working with women.
Sure, yeah. So I would probably say that I started back in college. As far as my pursuit in mental and emotional health, really just going through a lot of childhood trauma myself and things that I dealt with personally in my own family, and just my own personal journey really prompted me or encouraged me to do this work. And so far beyond just schooling, I also realized that I was anointed for this. I felt like this was a part of my purpose and what God wanted me to do. And so, coupled with skill set as far as schooling, and then just my personal life history, and then just a burden that I have for those that are hurting and those that are broken and those that experience trauma in their lives, it really encouraged me and just prompted me to do this work. So it started many years ago as far as schooling goes, but the last 6 years I've really been doing my own thing, entrepreneurial journey, with really helping women in this capacity with programs and different things like that I have.
So I want to ask you, you are saying that in the 6 years you've done your entrepreneurial journey, what sort of, how did you get to letting go of what you were doing and stepping into becoming that entrepreneur?
It really was a walk of faith. I've always worked in like corporate settings, very professional settings. And so, what I do one on one, or the things I do with group counseling and coaching, it's not as structured as a corporate 9 to 5, right? And so, it really did take a walk of faith to say, okay, God, I'm going to step away from the structured environment and really trust you to push me into this new way of life, this new understanding of who I am. And so, again, I really wanted to help others. And so, through my own personal journey, I started to blog. And from there, that blog turned into a community, which that community turned into services, and that those services turned into speaking events. And so it really just came from me personally wanting to express my own personal journey, how I helped myself, what I went through, and being able to put that in a form that can help someone else. And so I just said, you know what, I'm out here. I'm just going to do it. I'm going to take this leap of faith. I'm going to take this walk, and I'm going to trust God in the process. And so, of course, entrepreneurial anything is hard. Nothing is easy when it comes to your entrepreneurial journey, but it's been worth it. So even the hard work has been worth it, and I'm grateful that God has chosen me to do this work.
I love that. I think that leads me into the question, what does faith mean to you? Because you had to have a lot of faith.
Absolutely. Faith to me is really just trusting God and being obedient to his word. I think so much we can think about when you have to walk on water, right? When you have to go out into the deep and do something that's untraditional. It's like, God, are you going to catch me if I fall? Am I going to land on my face? Am I going to fail? You have all these different thoughts in your mind, but you have to realize that faith has to be activated, and that's activated by action. And so it really is obedience and just trusting God when he tells you to go or he tells you to do anything, that he's going to back you up. And so, God never opens a door or prepares you or tells you to launch anything without him being right there to catch you if you do stumble, because with failure comes success, because you're learning something. And so it's just important that, with a faith walk, you activate it by doing, it's by action, and just realize realizing that you may fail, you may not get it right, but God is there to make sure that in the midst of all of that, he carries you through.
I love that. There was a lot in there that you said, but I wanted to ask, you said obedience, and I think that that is a super important part of understanding your faith and understanding God. And how did you know you were walking in obedience as you were going into from your job into entrepreneurship and even working with women, the women you were working with?
I would say that I knew I was being obedient when I would see growth in certain areas, not necessarily that it was outstanding growth right away, but I knew that I was making an impact. And so even in moments that were hard, God would always send confirmation. Whether somebody inboxed me and said, "Oh my God, I'm so grateful that you sent that email, or you went live, or you told part of your testimony or your story." God always confirmed it by people coming back to me and just saying, "I'm just so grateful for you. I'm so grateful that you're this transparent, this open. I'm so grateful for, the work that you do." And that really kept me going because, it can be very discouraging when you're starting off and it's like, I'm doing all this work, but I don't see necessarily any type of growth or movement. But God would send those small confirmations of people just saying, "Keep going, you are, this is blessing me, and I'm going to share this with so and so because I know this will bless them." And so I didn't do it for I didn't want to impact millions of people. That wasn't the fact. I wanted to impact the ones that God highlighted for me to impact, those that can be blessed by my life. And if that turned into a million people, that's amazing. But I wanted to make sure that if it was one, God went after the one, he left the 99. And so if it was just one that I impacted, I know it was a well done from him. And so that was what was important to me. And so that's kind of how I look at that question. Yeah.
That's good. I think so often we look at like this big picture and this big impact that we want to make, knowing that God has placed something in our heart. We want to go out and change the world. But like you said, God started with one. And if it's just one, we've made such a huge difference. Um, so with that and your faith, as an entrepreneur, how has your faith sort of grown which with each step of entrepreneurship? Because I feel as though there's levels. You get confirmation and then you go on to something else. How has that grown, and how have you matured in that growth?
Yeah, I'm telling you, that's a good question. Faith will challenge you, and so once you have the faith to see or believe one thing, it's almost like, okay, God, I know you can do even more. And so it really does challenge you to realize that the Bible tells us that he's able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we can ask or think, right? According to the power that worketh within us. That's one of my favorite scriptures. And I tell people all the time. And so once you get to one level, that power continues to be activated. It grows, God doesn't want us to stay on the same level. He matures us over time. And that's even as believers, we're matured in our faith as far as our walk with him and our life with him. You're supposed to grow and develop and get older, right? And so when it comes to faith, it's the same way. That faith has to be activated over and over again. And if you see, one thing happen, okay, God, today I impacted 5 people, but I know that you have called me to be a world changer. And so I can impact even more. And it's a pure pursuit, of going after the Lord and going after the things of God and purpose and all those different things. God is going to honor that. And so he trusts you with more. So as your faith is activated, God can trust you with more, knowing that you're going to obey his instructions and obey his word. And so it's like, okay, I gave you a little bit. Let me see if you have a little bit more, right? And so I've definitely had to grow in my faith, because had I not, I would be at square one still, right? If I wanted to, if I didn't want to be challenged, then I would just still be blogging and blogging only, But God really stretched me and said, "I know you can do more," and that's where risks take place, and with faith comes risk as well. So, yeah, I've had to develop, I've had to grow, I've had to mature, but God has definitely stretched me in that.
That was wow, that was a whole mouthful. I love the that you said, faith is constantly growing. You're constantly growing, and faith is something that evolves over time. And I think it's so important. I'm actually reading a book by I think it's Watchman Nee, and it's called Sit walk and stand, and it's all about maturing and growth. And so I think that's a good note for the audience, that we should always be maturing, growing, extending our faith, extending on what it is that we're called to do in our purpose. And also, I think it takes time, you know
Yeah.
I think it takes time. And what have been some of your biggest struggles when it comes to understanding that it takes time, and there's going to be step backs, and there's going to be things that pop out and happen, or day-to-day
Yeah.
life?
I am a huge planner. Okay. I was just talking to my husband about this, and I said one of the biggest stumbling blocks for me is that if I'm not able to plan or prepare, I don't won't necessarily want to move forward. And so when it comes to being an entrepreneur, you can't plan and prepare for everything. There's just certain things that are going to just be thrown. Monkey wrench is going to be thrown in there. And then when it comes to God really challenging you to grow as well, sometimes you cannot prepare for that. And so a stumbling block for me sometimes is my hesitation to move forward if I don't feel fully prepared or planned out. I don't like surprises. I don't like things to come and I don't know about them. I don't like any of it. So, God, and then God thought it was funny. So a season of that, it was surprise after surprise after surprise to get me out of my comfort zone and realize that my faith is not in myself, it's in the Lord. And so if I continue to walk in that mindset, then I was depending on me. My faith was now in me and my ability, and God had to remove that crutch completely and said to me that I am the rock in which you have to lean on. And so I had to get to that understanding. And so him challenging me in that really broke me from that stumbling block. But not being able to plan or prepare was definitely a hindrance in my faith and my ability to move forward, entrepreneurship in general, and just in life.
I think that's good that you note that, because I think a lot of entrepreneurs, we some of us have the tendency to want to control and kind of like manipulate the situation, and we want it to come out this way, and we think if we plan, if we put all these things on our calendar, everything is going to line up. But like you said, with the entrepreneurial journey, things always come up, things always arise. And then with God, it's like ultimately you're on God's plan, ultimately you're on God's timing. So really, how much planning can you do if it's not really in partnership with where God wants you? So I think that's really good, and I hope the audience is taking notes, because God always has a plan. Are we following His plan? Are we following our own plan for
Yeah.
for what it is that we're supposed to be doing? I do have a question back to, you're the sole physician and you deal with trauma and those things. Why do you think it's so difficult for us as people to grapple with trauma and use that as part of owning our image? Where is the disconnect?
So trauma is extremely complex. And so the thing about it is if you have not dealt with or you have unresolved trauma, you can easily be triggered by, different situations that resemble what you experienced. And so when you see people that I always tell people that I work with, what are your triggers? So when something resembles your trauma and it triggers you, it happens again or something similar, it looks like what happened, you can resort back to many things. Isolation, people have anxiety attacks, panic attacks, different things of that nature. And I think specifically for the African American culture, mental health is not normalized. And so a lot of times people just don't want to put their hands on the fact that I do have trauma. I do have triggers. I'm dealing with anxiety. I do deal with depression. That these are things that I'm struggling with, on a day-to-day basis. I have high highs, I have low lows, just different things that can happen. And I think the problem with it is it's not normalized. It's not taught as you're in your upbringing to be okay with your feelings and express them, or if you need help to go see a therapist or go see a counselor. None of that is engraved in our systems and society as African Americans as we grow. And so that completely disconnects us from when there is the ability to ask for help, to just feel like I can ask for help, and so There's a lot of shame associated with it. There's a lot of guilt associated with it. There's a lot of fear associated with it. And I think the more we can normalize the fact that if you have to go see a counselor or a therapist, it doesn't mean that you're crazy or you have been, this extreme mental health issue. It just means you need a place to vent, a place to talk, a place to make sense of your thoughts. And then some people do have extreme issues where maybe you do need medication for a period of time, but you can get off the medication once you regulate yourself and you deal with the trauma that's behind the emotions that are coming out. And so I also tell people all the time, emotions are indicators, they're signals. Something behind the scenes is happening mentally within me, and look at me, something's going on internally. And so we have to be willing to acknowledge those things and not overlook them, not suppress them, not throw them in the bag, not try to act like they're not there. And so the more intentional we are about those things, the more we can connect back to, hey, I had a traumatic experience. I've worked through it. And now I can help somebody else go through what I went through, with a helping hand or sharing my story. And so one of the things I am huge on is sharing my story. I don't care what questions are asked. I'll tell the truth about them because I know that it's going to help somebody else and it's going to be able to set someone else free. And it's going to liberate someone else from feeling shamed or guilty for what life threw them. And so I think the disconnect is that. And then if we can just normalize and be more intentional about transparency and vulnerability regarding our own stories, we can connect those dots back together.
I'm so glad you highlighted on the African American community because that was going to be one of my other questions is
Yeah.
why is, it's almost like it's very hidden, like no one wants to talk about it. And then if you, like you said, if you do bring it up, it's like, oh well, what's wrong with you, like why do you have to get a counselor? And really normalizing that it's okay to seek help, to get past those traumas so that you can really blossom into the person that you're meant to be, and again help somebody else along the way. So if anyone's out there that's dealing with anything, I hope that this really helps you to seek the help, or even acknowledge that you need help, that there are some emotional triggers. With that, how would one go about, I guess, essentially knowing that, okay, let me stop putting dirt over this, and really, like, how does one come to, I guess, sort of self-realization that, okay, now I'm ready to take this step? Or is there any practical tools?
Sometimes you have to just go for it. A lot of times, if you think too hard about it, you'll talk yourself out of it, especially if it's something that you feel that it's been a hard thing to deal with. Now, I will say that it's important that you do talk to a support system. If you have family, friends that support you, talk to them about the fact that you want to go see a therapist or a counselor. You want to be able to, get yourself into therapy to help you work through your issues. Be open enough to say, I need your support in this because this is new to me. I have some fears associated with it. I have some insecurities associated with it. And this is me being transparent and vulnerable. And I want to be able to come back to you and talk to you about my experience. And so sometimes those supportive voices are very needed. But I will say, when you do go through therapy, just depending on what your life was and the different types of trauma you've experienced, it can open up a whirlwind of emotions and just a new, things that you have to process through. And so you do want to prepare yourself for that. And so I tell people, one step at a time. Maybe that starts with prayer. Maybe that starts with acknowledging, through journaling, the things that you may be experiencing. From there, you have the courage now to talk to others and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking about. From there, maybe you then seek out different counselors or therapists you are looking to work with. You definitely want to do your research because every counselor or therapist isn't for you. You want to make sure you get someone that you feel comfortable with. And then from there, you make the first appointment, and you can be open with your mental health counselor or therapist about your fears, about your hesitations, and just be honest. And so it's a step-by-step process. It doesn't have to look the same for everyone, but I will say take one step at a time because it can open up a lot that maybe you don't even realize is there. Yeah.
I love the breakdown of that. And I love that, you kind of broke down the steps to kind of take to go through and see if you need that help. And then I was going to ask, because I know that, you are now coaching women. And I know that there's therapists and there's psychiatrists and there's some people go to pastors. And that there's just different options out there. Is there any recommendations you have as far as like how people would choose that, or um, how they would make that decision?
Yeah, I mean, it really just depends on the issue. Now, if you have some type of like a mental health diagnosis, then you will want to make sure you're going to a psychiatrist. I'm sure you'll be under some type of care if you've had a mental health diagnosis. If you are going for, talk therapy to talk through some of your trauma, or if you're dealing with depression or anxiety that is unregulated and you're just not able to get a hold of it, or if you're having panic attacks, anxiety attacks, then you want to go to a mental health professional like a therapist, or something of that nature. Now, a pastor can help you walk through some life issues. If you're having some life issues, some life difficulties, not knowing how to make life decisions, maybe you're dealing with grief or something of that nature, then a pastor can help you. And so it really just depends on what the issue is and the severity of the issue. And that will help determine who you think is best. But like I said, you want to do your research as well, because just because it's a mental health professional or a therapist, what are they specializing in? And is this a person that's a good match for you? And so you just want to make sure that you do your research first and just determine what you're going in for. And there's always an intake form to gather more information and different things of that nature. So that's just kind of how you can think of it.
And I feel like all of this information that you're giving us in the audience, I'm hearing intentionality, and I'm also hearing, it's self care. Part of being owning your image is taking care of yourself, and that's not just on the outside. That's dealing with spiritually and your mental health. And so look at this, not as, again, like, let's normalize that you don't have a problem, but let's normalize that this is part of self-care, part of being the best version of yourself. And so navigating into self-care, what is it that you do? You pour out to people and helping them with their mental health. I could assume, with dealing with so many different personalities and that takes something out of you. How do you sort of refill yourself back up so that you're good and able to pour out?
Yes, that's a great question. First and foremost, I believe that every counselor, therapist needs a counselor or therapist. So, just depending on the season I'm in, if I feel very overwhelmed with what I may be going through personally, I don't have an issue with pulling out my therapist number and saying, "Hey, I need a session." So that's one thing that I am very accountable to. Second, I just have to do things like go and get my nails done. That's self care for me. I have to go and get massages every so often. That's self care for me. And then also, I just will not neglect my devotion time in the mornings. That's self care for me. Being able to read a book after I finish up my workday, a couple pages or a chapter, that's self care for me. And so I'm intentional about scheduling those things, making sure we have date nights with my husband. That's self care for our marriage, right? That's marriage care. And just doing all those different things to make sure that as I schedule clients, I also schedule myself in. And so if I'm not good, I'm not good to anyone else that I'm working with. And so I make sure that I make my self care, my mental health, my emotional health top priority before anything else. And so I'll schedule that in before I schedule anything in. And so I have to make sure that clients book their appointments at least a week in advance so that I can make sure that my schedule is not last minute, 24 hours, you come in, anything like that. So yeah, that's what I do personally.
That's really good. A week in advance and making yourself a top priority.
Yeah.
I know from experience as an entrepreneur, we want to give, sometimes give, and then you look up and it's like there's 2 months of giving and you looking busted, your hair not done, you don't feel good, you're eating bad, and it's just like a roller coaster. So really being intentional about making yourself a top priority. Was there ever a time where you felt guilty about that? Like making yourself a top priority when you know you want to give? Like, was there ever any type of hesitation there?
Oh yeah, I would have clients that would say, "Hey, can I just, I really just need this, or I really just need that." And so I had to really learn the language of boundaries, and I learned that even more so once I had a child. And so I just knew that there was no possible way I could just give myself to all these capacities and drain myself dry. When now having an added child to my life, that takes even more for me as well. And so I really had to make sure that I balanced all of that out by priority. Whatever was priority is what it was most important to me. So, but I would definitely say I gave in a lot of times of just, trying to meet the needs of others, but neglecting my own needs. And so I had to make sure that I realized that if I give a yes to them, I'm taking something away from myself. I'm giving a no to myself. And so I made sure to give myself a yes first so that I knew else I could give a yes to or what I had to give a no to.
I love that you said, once you had a child, you realized that you had to, have even more a sense of boundaries. And I think that that's a really good note for the audience, for everyone out there with children, that as your seasons change, you have to readjust and reevaluate what you can and can't do, and what your self-care is going to look like in that season. With having, your husband, having the business, having the babies, how do you keep yourself organized?
I live and breathe my calendar. Literally live and breathe my calendar. And so Google Calendar is one of my biggest things, but I also write down my checklist, my to-do list every single day, and I keep a weekly planner as well. And so I am huge on I have to have this in my schedule. If it's not in my schedule, it's just not going to happen. And so I have to keep it that way, of course having some wiggle room, because you don't know what can happen. But if I don't do it that way, I won't have the structure that I need to maintain what is priority today. And so what I like to do as well is to write out the top 3 to 5 things that I know have to get done that day. Absolutely no, there's no working around it, and then schedule everything else around that. But I'm also big on scheduling time slots for things. And that helps me tremendously to be able to know what time different things are going to happen, to keep me on schedule, to keep me on track. But I'm also not so glued to it that when structure does not happen, that it just I fall apart either. So I make sure that I'm flexible with my ability, but I also have to make sure I maintain boundaries with my calendar and my schedule as well.
So the common theme here I'm hearing all throughout this is intentionality, boundaries, and really understanding and knowing what works for you, because all of us are different. But again, knowing yourself is also part of self-care and owning your image, and really understanding what's going to work for you so that you can pour out to others to give the best version of yourself. And so we have talked about accountability, we've talked about self-care, we talked about faith. One last question on accountability. As far as your community goes, your circle, um, how has that sort of, let me roll back because I'm trying to get the question out. How has community helped shape you to be accountable and you showing up and doing the things that you're supposed to do and want to do?
Yeah, I think community is huge, especially having just that support system to push you, because you're going to have moments where it's like, especially as an entrepreneur, I don't want to do this anymore. This is just overwhelming. It's just a lot of work. Can I do this? You question yourself. It's just a lot that goes with it emotionally. And so having that support system to encourage you when you cannot encourage yourself, having that support system to say, hey, remember you had these plans, remember your vision when you had this, remember when you were excited about this, and just kind of giving back to you what you gave them in a sense, and reminding you of the things that God has placed in you as well. This can be a very exhausting journey. And so you need cheerleaders, you need people that are also going to call you out on your mess too, and tell you, hey, you're not doing what you said you were going to be doing, you're getting sidetracked, all those different things. And making sure you remain integral through the process, because it can be very, very easy with social media to, get big headed and different things of that nature. And so your accountability needs to make sure you remain humble as well. So my accountability and my community has been extremely important in my journey, and encouraging me and making me feel supported, and being able to open up and be transparent and vulnerable. You need people around you that you can be 100% yourself around. You can be 100% the person you are without judgment, even if they have to challenge you, even if they have to say, get it together, whatever. You need to be able to have a safe place to know that wherever you are putting this information, they're like a vault. And so my support system has been that for me. And I encourage everybody to get a support system like that, because it also aids in healing and transformation. You absolutely cannot heal, you cannot transform, you cannot grow outside of community. You need mirrors, and community is a mirror to show you yourself and to challenge you and to measure you. And so you can't do that on your own. And so there's so many benefits to having the right community and support system.
You summed it up so great. Community is important, and like you said, mirrors. You've got to. I think about marriage because it's kind of the same thing. Like marriage is a direct reflection of who you are 24/7. So having that in your corner, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Raven, for being here today, for blessing us with all of your information. We want to know and let the audience know how they can stay connected to you, or if they're interested in working with you. Please give us all your information.
Absolutely. You can visit my website at www.ravencnole.com. You can also find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and YouTube at Raven C Nole.
Okay. There it goes, everybody. We're so happy to have had this time with you. Deshante, anything else you want to add?
Now, I was just going to add that I actually had listened to Raven on Clubhouse. I know that is popping right now. And that is, I came across you speaking. I don't even know. And I was just like, wow, this woman's powerful. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Also on Clubhouse, giving some knowledge too, guys. But I think that's it. This has been really, really, really impactful, I think. And of course, because it's with the soul physician. I love that name. The first time I read it, I was like, the soul physician. That rings out. So thank you, Raven.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies. I appreciate it.
All right.
Well, this wraps up another awesome episode of Own Your Image Beyond the Mirror. We hope you enjoyed. Thank you again, Raven, and we will see you guys next time. Bye.
Bye.